what is a personal deadline? What function does a personal deadline? I'm not talking about an external deadline, like when somebody employs you to write a piece of music for them. That's a completely different situation. But a personal deadline, one that you make with yourself. So for example, me making my albums, I make these personal deadlines. Some of them I hit, some of them I don't, right? But either way, they actually fill a certain function in my life. And people often ask me, they go, personal deadlines just don't work for me. And I think the reason is that they're thinking about them as if they're external deadlines set by someone else. The trouble is with a personal deadline is they're not external. Someone else hasn't set them for you. I mean, of course, in Make an Album with Mike, in a sense, it's external. That's one of the benefits of it, in that I've set the deadline. That means being in Make an Album with Mike, you are trying to hit that deadline that I've set. But really, it's still your deadline. Okay. And what I always encourage Make an Album with Mikeers to do is to be flexible with the deadline. People go, "Oh no, flexible with the deadline? That means I failed. That means I can do anything. That means there's absolutely no point in them." Well, this is a very either-or way of thinking about it. Either I hit the deadline, right, and make it happen and beat myself over the head with it, or there's no point. That's absolutely not the case, okay? Because a deadline is not a weapon to beat yourself with. As I've often said, when you decided to join Make an Album with Mike 4 or 3 months ago, right, you didn't know exactly what it would entail. You didn't know exactly what would happen in your life. You didn't know so many different things when you decided that you were going to hit this deadline. Moving towards the deadline brings information which you don't have when you set it. And that is always the case with any kind of goal. In a sense, the word realistic goals is an oxymoron. If a goal was real, it wouldn't be a goal. It would be a thing that you'd done, right? So in moving towards a goal, things change. Life happens. You learn stuff about yourself. Often that means you have to change the deadline, right? And you have to be flexible with it, because a deadline is in reality a tool that helps you move forward. And it is a mistake. I've said it so many times. It's a mistake to turn it into a weapon to beat yourself with. And it is not true to say that if you are flexible with deadlines, there's no point in them. And I think this is the problem with a lot of people's way of thinking about deadlines. An external deadline is very, very different. Say someone's paying you and they're like engage you to write a piece of music and they're expecting it on a certain day because they've got to do this, that, and the other with it. That's a totally different situation. With a personal deadline, you've got to think about it as a tool and you've got to be flexible with it. Let's talk about being flexible with it, because as we get closer to the deadline, you might realize, okay, so the idea I had at the start isn't exactly what I'm going to be able to achieve. This doesn't mean you failed. It means that you've created knowledge. Information has come to you from the situation, from what's happened about yourself, about what you can and can't do. That means that you are now in a better position to actually think about what you're going to achieve. And it may well mean lowering the bar, and that is okay. But there are 3 ways to lower the bar that I want you to think about. One, which is personally my least favorite, and I'll tell you why in a second, is to give yourself more time, right? So you say, I decided that I was going to complete an album, but I'm not going to complete it in 3 weeks' time. There's no way I could do that given my schedule. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to give myself another 2 weeks in order to complete this album. That's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's my least preferred one. The reason being that if after the 3 weeks, you're no longer in Make an Album with Mike, sometimes it's harder to stick to that or to hit that later deadline. And really the most important thing that you are doing here is finishing some music. It doesn't actually matter if it's an album. It would be great if it was. Again, that's what we're attempting to do. But again, we want to be flexible. So it doesn't matter if it is a full album. It could be an EP. So personally, I would prefer to not to put more time on it, because the other thing is it's all too easy to say, I'm going to put another week on it. I'm going to put another week on it. I'm going to put another, and it just keeps on getting pushed out. Again, it's up to you. You can do more time. Like, for instance, let's say that you have got an album basically ready, but you just need an extra week. Okay, that's a situation in which I might add more time. But if you're not in that kind of a situation, if it's just looking very, very unlikely, then one preferred option that I have is I actually make the release shorter. So in other words, I would prefer to do less tracks than add on more time in general. The reason for that is that the purpose of finishing music is for you to actually complete it and put it out into the world so that you get when I say the feedback, I'm not just talking about feedback from other people. In fact, even if there wasn't any feedback from other people, you would have this experience of putting music into the world that people that you don't know creates a different perspective you have on that music. It creates a different relationship with that music. And that relationship is absolutely essential for you to learn something from it. If you never finish and never put anything out into the world for people who you don't know to listen to, you never have that perspective shift. You never really create that learning. There was an album that I never finished. In fact, some of the tracks that were on that album I'm now redoing for this one. And I never finished it. And I didn't really learn anything from it. I improved through the making of it, but it's almost like there were no lessons to take from it because I didn't finish it. The only thing I learned was that I needed to finish it. Right? So whereas if I compare it to the first album that I finished and the third one that I finished, there was something that I could then react against almost, or go, actually, I wish I'd have done that, or I wish I hadn't have done that, or he really can't stand the way I go more all the time in the singing. Or it's almost like the finishing of it allows me to take lessons from it. So I prefer, rather than adding more time, which for me just ends up, I'm going to add more time, and a bit more time, and a bit more time, is to make the thing shorter and still try to finish the thing on deadline. However, that's not what I'm choosing to do on this occasion, because there is another option. I, personally, am choosing to make the project smaller. What do I mean by that? I have less things in the music. So, for example, if you listen to my I Think I Have a Problem track that I've talked about a number of different times, it's got lots and lots of different parts in there, right? But if I compare that to, for instance, just a piano and a voice, there's only two things in there, right? So it's smaller. It's a smaller project. There's less for me to think about. There's less for me to do. There's less for me to mix. Why would I choose to do something smaller? Well, because of the goals that I have right now. I have realized very clearly that the biggest opportunity in terms of improving my music, the biggest growth opportunity for me, and remember, any given release is there to help you grow, not the other way around, right? So in terms of my growth opportunities, the most important thing for me is to improve my singing, to actually be able to release music that is just a piano and a voice. And people go, wow, that's great. I'm a very, very long way away from it. Right? And it's almost like when I add other things in there, it's taking away from that growth opportunity. So what I've chosen to do in this album, I am choosing to make each track much simpler and much smaller. Because number one, there are less things for me to do in terms of the finishing. And number two, it's forcing me to focus on where I want to grow the most. I'm not covering it up with other stuff. So that's another option for you as well. Instead of making this magnum opus, symphony orchestra type idea, think, well, how can I make it as simple as possible and focus it on where I want to grow the most? Because in doing that, you're actually making the album, the finishing of the album or the EP or whatever it might be, serve your growth. And as I've said, that's what we're doing here. We are finishing music in order to grow. We're not growing in order to finish music. Because by doing it that way around, by finishing music in order to grow, that's how we're going to end up making the best music we can in our lives.